Alright, ladies and gentlemen, MrCropper here. Looks like we're gonna have to do a little... Oh boy, into the desk there. Looks like we're gonna have to do a little bit of Sam Harris. He's being a naughty, naughty boy. I was listening to some more of this Free Will and sort of, really focusing on it. You know, how sometimes you listen to it, but you go, la-di-da. But then I was like, making sure. And, I caught him doing some naughty, naughty stuff. You know, if you really listen to them, they do naughty, naughty things. So we're going to go dive into it. Now, this afternoon was so beautiful outside, and I had the day off, and I had no excuse not to take my daughter to the park. And so we went to the hobby store first to get some paints, just to get a few extra paints, and found a traveling easel on sale, $130 on sale for $30. So I didn't get any paints, didn't have any budget left over. I was going to spend $10 on a couple extra paints I didn't need. And instead of spending $10 on a couple paints I didn't need, I spent $30 on a traveling easel that I never even dreamed I wanted. So now I've got a $130 easel that cost me $30, and I celebrated by painting a little scene at the park. There you go. Now if you think that's cute, just wait till you see it in real life and you'll go, oh God, that's rather garish. But it was sure fun to do, just while my daughter was playing. So that's what I did this afternoon. I think I'm charged up and ready to tear into Sam Harris. Alright, he's a naughty boy. Ready?
He could have done otherwise. He could have behaved differently than he did.
Okay, so
and not based on some random influences.
A murderer. Any given person could have behaved differently than he did. A murderer behaved a certain way. There were certain chemical things happening in his brain up to the moment of the murder. Okay? True. Right.
She had no control, but because he, as the conscious subject, was in fact the author of his actions.
Okay, now.
But the problem is no one has ever found a way of describing how physical processes could occur that would make sense of this claim.
So, in order for us to be the author of ourselves, we would have to give a description of the physical processes inside of our brain. Or otherwise, that's just a nonsense claim. Okay? Alright? That's just the claim that Sam is making. In order for us to make a claim like that, we would have to describe the physical processes. That's pretty strong. But that's just fluff. We're not even getting to the meat yet. And that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad.
So consider your generic murderer. A person's choice to commit a murder is preceded by a certain pattern of electrochemical activity in his brain.
All right. True. Now, is that electrochemical activity just and metaphysically given? Or is there anything that we can say about it? Does it come into a context, and does it exist within a context? And did a context bring it into existence? Or is it just a platonic floating zero in a vacuum?
Which is in turn the product of prior causes.
There. It is in turn it is the product of prior causes. Now that's a slippery slope he's taking us down. When he says it's the result of prior causes, he's only giving us a little bit. Just cause. Cause and effect, that's it. He's not giving us anything else that could operate the cause. Right? He hasn't given us free will. But we're going to say, yes, some of those things in the person's mind were caused by their own free will. Many of them over the life of their life.
Some combination of bad genes and the developmental effects of an unhappy childhood.
So he lists things that bad genes could contribute, right? Unhappy childhood could contribute. Now, what if we just go to Sam and mention somebody with bad genes, whatever that means, low IQ, and unhappy childhood, beaten all the time, and show him, look, this guy ended up owning 9 car dealerships and being a millionaire, And what if we give him like argument from anecdote, which is basically what he's doing here, right? So what if we give him the other, a Rockefeller who came from a very poor family, right? At some point they lived in crappy little stone hut, and then a generation later they had mansions all over the place. So what's the poor childhood? What do we do with that? At what point do we say, well, this person chose, blows his head off. He can't. How could that person choose? There were all the things that happened in his past. So how could he choose?
Whatever is impinging on his brain in that moment, we are downstream of causes of which we're not conscious, and
so we're not necessarily conscious of every cause that takes place over us, right? Now, objectivists have a way of viewing this. We say that person's not really conscious of he says he's an objectivist, but he's still operating automatically on some suppositions. We can tell, We have a way of looking at this. Sam has no way of viewing this. He doesn't think, he doesn't have any idea what is going on. It's as though he's looking at a cup of water, and the objectivists are describing the patterns of ocean waves, and Sam is sitting at some cafe somewhere looking at his cup of water, and he says, I see no motion here. I see. That's the type of thinking Sam is doing. Very, very crappy surface thinking. Now, just to solidify what we're talking about, let's go back 15 seconds here.
Some combination of bad genes and the developmental effects of an unhappy childhood, and then whatever is impinging on his brain in that moment. We are downstream of causes of which we're not conscious, and
all, or just some? What's sufficient for your case, Sam? What if I give you some? What if I say I'm not conscious of some? But what if I get to claim that I am conscious of some? Then can we step away from your game? But that would include free will, so of course he's not going to go there. So it wouldn't matter whether we're conscious of it or not. Consciousness is an illusion anyway. Free will's an illusion. We just do whatever we're destined to do in any moment, so it doesn't matter. According to him.
Be conscious. The moment we catch sight of the stream of causes,
conscious. What was that?
Conscious and cannot possibly be conscious. The moment we catch sight of this, whatever is impinging on his brain in that moment, we are downstream of causes of which we're not conscious and cannot possibly be conscious.
Cannot possibly be conscious. Now, I haven't flushed that argument through a lot. I wonder what the claim exactly means, because it seems like he's conscious of them. It's not possible for us to be conscious of these. You mean in the act of consciousness while it's happening, but you can identify them afterwards. He seems like he's claiming knowledge about them, and if that's true, then we ought to be able to identify them ourselves. Now, maybe if he heard my case, he would say, yes, but you're talking about a very high bar of people who are able to introspect, and that's 5% or 1% or 10% of the population or something, and most people can't be held up to that, Maybe that's what he would say to me. I don't know. What would you say to this case, Sam Harris? What would you say that we... No, he can't say anything to it. We don't have free will to begin with. Okay, let's see.
The moment we catch sight of this stream of causes, reaching back into this person's childhood and beyond, and out into the world beyond their skin,
a stream of causes. Now he'll I don't know what qualifies as a cause. An advertising poster strikes his face, his eyes, and he likes the red and the blue on the advertising poster, so he reads it, and then it seems like a good price because of thoughts from his grandma about thrift. So then he seeks that address and goes to that store. Is that like the causes? Like, is there any room in there for a human being to say, well, I would go there, but I don't have the money in my pocket right now. I would go do whatever that sales poster says I should go do, but I just don't have the money. Is there any room in there for a human being to have free will, or are we just an automatic machine? Or do we just automatically think poster, should go buy that, wait, not enough money for rent, I mean, how much of this stuff is automatic, even considering the rent? And what about the people that consider the rent but actually still go by the poster? Is that just because their dad didn't teach them thrift? I mean, there's no room anywhere. You see, what I'm trying to point out, I guess, is that there's room everywhere for free will. Like, it's running into Sam everywhere. He's equivocating around it left, right, and center. He's making up example after example after example to say, even this isn't free will. Even this isn't free will. Even this isn't free will. And he makes some really big, bald assertions, like the one we started the video with. It's an insane, huge assertion that you would have to give a physical accounting of the mechanisms in order to say that you have knowledge of it. I mean, we have knowledge of free will. We don't need to give a physical accounting of the mechanisms. It's like saying the Greeks didn't know that anything pulled things down because they didn't understand gravity. You know, their growing understanding of gravity was not negated by Newton. Newton did not teach them that things actually float, you know. Newton taught them more about gravity. He didn't explode their meaning of gravity. And Sam doesn't understand that sort of hierarchy of the world, or structure of the world, of knowledge.
His culpability seems to disappear. To say that he would have done otherwise...
His culpability, the criminal's culpability, seems to disappear. Because he's just a series of everything up to that point. Now, at some point, like, what if we take an example? Maybe Sam is looking at Platonic floating nonsense. Maybe if he would look at particular examples, like I'd say this dentist, good guy his whole life, one day came home from the office and killed his wife. You know, 27 years of marriage, one day came home and killed his wife. Now, somebody's digging through paperwork 15 years later, the guy's languishing in prison, and somebody comes across some paperwork and it says, so-and-so sent a letter, and it was received, and it was open, and we saw it was on his desk, and the letter said that his company was being sued or whatever for fraud or whatever, so now we know the real reason that he did it. Okay, at what point do we say he didn't have to go home and kill his wife? Like, he was obviously a regular... You're making up these people who had bad genes, they had a bad childhood, they were beaten all their life. This guy had good genes, good childhood, peaceful parents, lived his whole life as a peaceful man. Went home and killed his wife. Why? I don't know, but they put him in prison, right? Maybe he killed his wife as mercy for whatever was that he was being sued at his dentist office. Maybe he killed his wife because he's just a terrible guy, and it was the last thing he wanted to do before he knew he was going to prison. Maybe he wouldn't have gone to prison. Maybe it was just he was going broke. Maybe his company just was going to go broke and he was just going to be embarrassed and have to start over and be a cook at a restaurant or something and never be a dentist again. You know, who knows what the story was? Why did he commit murder, you know? And you're saying that that's just an automatic chain from his past. You know, that example, I think right there, if as long as we're arguing from anecdote and statistic, then I can do that too. He's statistically, murderers had a bad childhood. Well, what about the one that didn't? Maybe he proves free will. Is that it, Sam? If I can find a murderer who had good genes, good childhood, wasn't beaten, and one day decided to commit murder, then free will is proven. Like, is that how weak your case is, Sam? It seems like it's almost that weak.
Or could have done otherwise, had he wanted to.
Could have, yeah.
It's simply to say he would have been a different person had he been a different person, or he would have lived in a different year.
Sam takes thoughts as metaphysically given. He thinks that they just plain occur. We don't choose our thoughts, and we don't choose what we thought before. Now, we might not choose our thought any given second. That's the absolute maximum that I'll give Sam. The utter maximum. We don't choose thoughts any given instant, any given second. We do choose what thoughts we get over time by saying to ourselves how we appraise things. Now, one quick example from me. I used to be terribly bored by the 1800s because raised religiously, it was all about the Mormon pioneers in their wagons and Joseph Smith, and I didn't care for religion, and I didn't get any of it. I didn't see any of it. Didn't care for it. Now, the older I got, then objectivism, I said the 1800s, well, okay, that's railroads. That's a big war against slavery. What's that? A war to end slavery? That's pretty heroic. It went from agrarian to industrial civilization. At the end of it, we had cars, where we had horses at the beginning. I started saying, all right, I need to, there's more to it. So I started realigning my emotional attitude to it. I started collecting books on it, and eventually I started reading the books on it. And so my appraisal, my philosophical appraisal, if you will, my value appraisal of the 1800s was out of alignment with my emotional appraisal. My emotional appraisal was boring, and my value appraisal was essential, very essential. And so, not everyone's going to take the effort, and not even, you don't have to, you just be happier if you do it. The amazing knowledge I have of the 1800s and the amazing things that happened in the 1800s that I wouldn't have known about and wouldn't have the joy of having studied and have knowledge of if I wouldn't have tried to realign my values, my emotions. Not realign my values. Use my values to realign my emotions. Pardon me. Sam Harris can't conceive of such a thing. Absolutely every single word I just said, he would just wave his hand and say, well, of course, thoughts just appear in your brain. You don't choose. Quote, thoughts simply appear. End quote. Sam Harris.
Had he lived in a different universe. And as disturbing as I might find such a person's behavior, I have to admit that if I could trade places with him, atom for atom, I would be him.
But would you have free will? Because he had free will. Now maybe 10% or 20% or 40% are just, they're going to commit murder. And if it's not today, it's next week or next month. That's what we have prisons for. That doesn't negate free will. It occurs to me that discussing murder is probably not a good philosophical foundation for a discussion of free will. Maybe somebody on a desert island and really closely analyzing what a person on a desert island would do would be a good thought experiment, because it actually happens. People do get trapped on desert islands from time to time, and then they get off them and they write books and memoirs, and movies are made about them, Cast Away. And so that happens. So let's at least discuss, if we're going to discuss extremely rare ivory tower things, then I vote desert island, Sam. Sam, give me some desert island analysis. What would a person do on a desert island? Would they have free will, or would they be at the random interactions of the values and the people around them?
There's no extra part of me that could decide to see the world differently or could decide to resist the impulse to victimize other people.
There's no part of you that could decide to resist the impulse to victimize other people. So these people aren't guilty then. Now, he might be amazed if we took away the police, how quickly more people would succumb to their inability, how quickly... No, he would be amazed. What would he be amazed at there, wouldn't he? I mean, if violence explodes when the police go on strike, then that would amaze Sam. Why would that amaze Sam? Because... differently, or could decide trade places with him, atom for atom, I would be him. Sam would be amazed at an explosion of violence when the police go on strike, because the people who are violent and criminals are already being violent and being criminal. Whether or not the police are there has no effect on it.
There's no extra part of me that could decide to see the world differently, or
there's no extra part of a person that decides to see the world differently. They'll either commit murder or not. They're either going to do a bad thing or they're not. There's not any other considerations.
or could decide.
It's their history. It's their now.
Resisting.
All of a sudden, the police go on strike and they run out and run down and break into the local place, and people are getting shot and places are getting looted. So, are these criminals, or is this just a different? So what? He has. See, I don't think he has any basis to understand that. And what about the people in a riot that don't loot? What about the ones that stand around shooting looters? Oh no, I can't deal with Sam Harris.
Calls to victimize other people. And even if you believe that each of us harbors an immortal soul, this problem of responsibility remains. I cannot take credit for the fact that I don't have the soul of a psychopath.
He can't take credit for that. Well, all right. Funny points aside, with which I don't. Okay, again, I don't know how instructive it is to discuss murder. Maybe you can't take credit for not being 1% or 2%. I mean, how many people commit murder? Is it 1%? Is it that high? Is it 2%? What is it? I know in primitive societies it's like 16% or 18 or 30 or something really high. But in our society it's not that high. Now, how instructive is it to be analyzing those people? And how instructive is it to say that those people didn't choose where they came from? How instructive is that for our moral compass and the question of free will? Maybe, first of all, maybe if we realize that free will exists by looking at actual normal cases, then when we go look at a murderer, we won't be confused. We'll say, you were presented, we keep putting things in your face, buddy. We gave you a job. We gave you a program downtown with Nancy. She set you up with a construction job over there with that crew. You've been getting regular paychecks. You've been showing up to work. And now we find you off on a bender breaking into people's cars one night. We're trying, like we're doing everything for him. He chooses to fall off. And Sam says he couldn't have done otherwise. Right? Well, what about the dentist then? Couldn't have done otherwise? He did otherwise his whole entire life and then broke and did otherwise. Couldn't have done otherwise? Where do you ever find responsibility? See, what argument do you make against somebody that's just such a goddamn mess? This is not an argument, Sam. This is so not an argument.
I didn't make my soul.
Yes, you did, Sam. Yes, you did. Now, not everybody makes their soul to the same extent. That much I will give you. If somebody really didn't make their soul, and every time in their lifetime they ever had a chance to choose their own values and their own decisions, always defaulted to something somebody else told them, then my police force would still hold them responsible for their actions. We would not care whether or not they blanked out and ignored their mind and just followed other people. Doesn't matter. But to the extent that you can think for yourself and you're willing to focus and choose your own values and reevaluate as you go through your life and say, I used to think that was boring, but I need to take more interest in it and stuff. The extent that, to which you can do that, you are in control of your life and you are the author of your own soul. There we are, ladies and gentlemen. Where are we? 24 minutes into this video, and I get to an objectivist punchline. We are the author of our own soul. An objectivist punchline which just strikes a chord of obviousness. It's a well-integrated fact for objectivists. Each man is the author of his own soul. Now that sentence right there is absolutely and directly contradicted by Sam Harris right here, isn't it?
This problem of responsibility remains. I cannot take credit for the fact that I don't have the soul of a psychopath.
Okay? He is not the author of his own soul, but objectivists say that we are. Sam Harris is missing out on an awful, awful lot by not viewing the world as a place with free will. He actually loses the ability to view people as self-made people. He actually loses the ability to see guilt. That's very serious, ladies and gentlemen. If you can't see guilt, then you can't punish people, you can't correct behavior, you can't judge people. This is very serious philosophy. This is very serious nonsense. And he gets all this trouble started by ignoring the fact that he can introspect free will. He doesn't walk out in front of buses, when he sees them, and that's an act of free will. He can introspect that he has free will. He doesn't commit suicide every minute that he doesn't commit suicide driving down the freeway. He focuses and doesn't just doze off and do whatever. That's free will, to focus in a dangerous situation. And he can't introspect that simple fact, or won't. Why? What's his motive? I don't know what his motive is exactly, but he cannot tell the difference between a guilty and an innocent person anymore.
I didn't make my soul.
I didn't make my soul. Well, Sam Harris, I made mine. And you shouldn't be bragging about that in public.